Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for coming. Thanks for the invite to speak. Special thanks to George Caesar and Father Greg for coming all this way. I normally start with a kind of a disclaimer. There's a few religious references in it, but it's all for good cause. And because I'm from Ayrshire, I'll probably swear at some point by accident. I was a bit held up today as... there was a Waterston's lorry had shed its load of thesauruses, and the police announced that they were amazed, aghast, agog, and taken aback. I'll go on a little bit about who I am just shortly, but I think it's really important to kind of put it in context of, we're very good at violence in Scotland. We've been championing it for about 2 centuries, or 2 millennium. So a wee bit about the history, a bit about where we are now, and a bit about where we're going. As I say, I work at the Institute for Neurological Sciences. Not this one, this is a nice shiny one in Toronto. I live in the kind of crappy looking one over in Govan. But at medical school, I was always amazed in retrospect. Motor neuron disease affects roughly 1 in 50,000 people. Violence affects all of us, and physically affects 1 in 3 women in a lifetime. We don't hear about it as an entity. Just looking at a quick history of violence in Scotland, the Romans, at the peak of their power, over about 700 years, controlled all of Europe, Asia, the Middle East, North Africa, and they were in England for about 400 years. They were in Scotland for about an hour and a half. Before they actually built 2 walls to keep the Scots out, so they had defeated everyone, and actually a troop of legionnaires went missing in Cumnock, and if you've ever been to Cumnock, that will probably come as no surprise. The Scots, population-wise, were mainly Celts, who were kind of angry, red-haired people from Germany. Some of the Scandinavians, who were mainly Vikings, who were angry, blonde-haired people. And the Scots were actually a group of Irish people. The Scots were an Irish tribe, but not the kind of nice tribe, a bit like this. We got the mental ones. The Anglo-Saxons, who were mainly Danish and German Vikings, effectively invaded England about 800 and took over as the main predominant tribe there. They were then displaced by the Normans, and they were called the men from the north, who were the Vikings who'd moved into northern France to displace the other Vikings who were there. And then we had a wee bit of a dispute about 1298, where we then, using an Australian king, we then crowned an American, the King of Scotland. And it was relatively peaceful for the next few hundred years. We even loaned a kind of royal family, who then deposed because the King of the UK decided to marry a Catholic, which didn't go down very well, so they overthrew him, and then we got a Dutchman in to replace him. And then Bonnie Prince Charlie, who was, of course, an Italian, decided to come back and try and retake the crown in Scotland. And the English decided, to hell with this, let's get rid of the Scots. So a wee bit of, and we actually invented ethnic cleansing, which was lovely. So we murdered everyone in the Highlands, and we also stopped them for about 100 years having any weapons. So, and this is me a few years ago at one of the Highland Games. Because they didn't allow people to train, so the hammer throwing and the caber tossing all came from the fact that the English wouldn't let the Scots train with weapons. And here's some of the American troops trying to manage a similar thing. And the Battle of Crimea was about the first time in 100 years that the troops actually got a chance to fight. And the Thin Red Line came from 2 lines of Argyll Highlanders of 200 strong, facing 16,000 Russian cavalry who were all charging towards them. And the Russians thought it was a trap, so they all turned and ran, and the Argyll Highlanders started running after them, going, "Come back, you bastards!" And then the British government realised the Scots were quite good at fighting, so they put us to fight in World War I. They sent us out in World War II, and at the D-Day landings, the famous Bill Millen went out armed with a set of bagpipes. I've never been under heavy machine gun fire, but I'm fairly sure I wouldn't want a bagpipe. And one of the German sniper machine gunners at the time, we said, "Why didn't you shoot him?" He said, "Because we thought he was a crazy man who was wearing a dress and playing this horrible music." And he only took up his rifle when he shot his mouthpiece out. David Stirling invented the SAS, again, very good at killing people. So we've had a long history of violence in Scotland. And again, there will be a bit of crossover with some of the things that are said as we go through today, But again, we were doing badly 20 years ago. And what makes Scotland angry? We tend to have slightly inflamed tempers. Everything in Scotland makes us angry. There are two main rival football teams. We hate football commentators. Alan Hansen was going, the final score was 3-1. I mean, you can't get any closer than that. Fairly sure it's a draw. Football managers we hate because they just say stupid things. Well, we'll hope for the right result. Really? I thought you were hoping for the wrong result. And we have two major religions in Scotland, which are atheist Catholics and atheist Protestants. We enjoy wholesome political debate, and this was a rousing discussion after the independence debate. And you notice that even though you're in the middle of a rousing debate, you don't bother to put your cigarette out. We hate crap tattoos, and it's always a source of amusement that I have made it my mission never to mention anyone's tattoo. I said to a woman, "I like your snake tattoo," and she said, "It's not a snake, it's a dolphin. I've just put on a lot of weight." And we hate anyone with an accent who's on television. It makes us cringe and it makes us very angry. Of course, apart from Big Sean, who could play any character, and whatever he said, we thought, oh, that's great. Things that we do like. We used to have a good sense of humour. Chick Murray once said when he said, "I was drunk and I fell over," and one of the women said, "Did you fall over?" And he said, "No, I was trying to break a bar of chocolate in my back pocket." We like booze. We drink more than about 40% more than south of the border. And there's a phrase in Scotland that says, "Give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he'll go off all weekend and get pissed." So my job, I work in the small building over here at the Institute for Neurosciences, and I'm an anaesthetist and anaesthetise for people to do the clever work like brain surgery, interventional radiology, when we actually got them, we can treat strokes and pull clots out and we can cure people. If you're involved in a road traffic accident, I can look after people in the intensive care unit. But prior to my career, when I started anaesthetics, I had worked for about 8 months and I was involved with the recipients of a school shooting. About 20 years ago, I was at Glasgow Royal and as a 2-year-old had been shot in the eye with an air rifle. And it makes you realise you can do what you can do, but you can't prevent it because it's too late, it's already happened. One of the great, it used to be vaccination was thought as a good thing. And smallpox has killed 1 in 10 people who've ever lived in history. That's enormous. And prevention is much better. And again, when the WHO decided, it doesn't have to be this way. But even then, Ebola, when it happened, 20,000 people died of Ebola over 2 years. Over the same 2 years, the number of people who died from interpersonal violence, 3.5 million. Another from a cost side of things, it's about 4% of GDP. If you lose people, if you have to repair people, if you have to fix people, if you have to cover disabilities, and also the long-term addictions. If you have a head injury, and at the moment, and not all head injuries are violence-related, but if you have a head injury, you're more likely to commit suicide, you're more likely to get dementia, you're more likely to become addicted, you're more likely to fall over, you're more likely to be epileptic, you have a shorter life. At the moment in Britain, 1.4 million people are walking about who've had a moderate or severe head injury. That's gigantic. And so when the violence reduction started up, it seemed to make sense because sometimes I'd be trying to do something and I'd get a patient like this in. And he said to me, "Doctor, I think I've got something in my head." And I thought, "I think you might be right." And we'd get other things like this. And Christine and I's motivations are probably slightly different. The main reason I get involved is I'm a lazy bastard. And these things take ages, and it's stressful. And again, we would spend all day, every day, literally, and at weekends, we'd be working 8 till 6 every day, fixing people up again. And I'd rather not do that. And so when it started, and the only reason, again, Christine's heard this story many times, but the only reason I was involved with it is I was wearing blues in the coffee room, and I needed to be in a photograph to balance it out. And my daughter looked at this picture and looked at it and said, "You look really handsome, Dad." And I said, "That's not me, that's me over the other side." And the large part of it was immunise people before they're infected. Can we say to kids, younger people, and the school lesson is effectively an hour lesson, it's a PSE lesson. We speak to them, we show them a video for about 20 minutes, and then we have a discussion with them. And we say, "Where's a safe place to get stabbed? Why did you carry a knife?" And we try and identify risk factors. And the biggest risk factor in Scotland is Buckfast. 85% of kids that are arrested under 25 have been drinking Buckfast in the previous 12 hours. And also to dispel myths, knives don't keep you safe. Weapons don't keep you safe. And usually we say the one person that wants to keep you safe is your mum. She doesn't say if you're popping out to the shops, take a Kalashnikov. Weapons change how you behave. And we try and put that connection there. People don't see anything wrong. Most people have got a cat or a dog, and I'll say to them, would you ever kill it? If I gave you some money, would you kill your dog? But you're taking a knife out and you're potentially going to kill another human being. It's just to contextualize what they're doing. And it's also to understand brains. The blue stuff in the brain there is called myelin. That's the bit that's the brakes. The bit that go, I wouldn't do that shit if I were you. Kids don't have very much of it. That's why they're dangerous. That's why they make wrong decisions. And also to emphasize that there's nothing brave about this. You know, kicking the crap out of somebody who's lying unconscious, there's nothing, that's not butch or brave. That's brave. Looking after somebody that's disabled, you know, having to get up to do a job every day you don't particularly want to, have to go to school every day, that's hard. And in Scotland, we do quite well. Churchill said that Scotland's made more impact on the world than any other country. You know, we're pretty good. We've, you know, major franchises, we've had the main characters in it. And again, we're doing much better. And over the last 18 years, the school programme's spoken to about 92,000 kids. It's an hour lesson, but I remember the hour lessons that I got at school. And it's difficult to know what you prevent. It's difficult to attribute everything you've done to yourself. But things are changing. Childhoods have changed. And I remember speaking to one of the police officers at school, and he said, this is the first generation that's going to do worse than we did. That's a terrible indictment. And I remembered my teens, and there was a lot of laughter. This is in, I looked at an old Radio Times that happened to be on. This is in a few days' television. There was the Goodies, Kenny Everett, the Young Ones, Harry Enfield, Morecambe and Wise, Frank Spencer, Fawlty Towers, Billy Connolly. There was satirical programmes. We had a few American things. You went to the cinema. There were funny films on. Another religious reference, The Life of Brian. There was lots of humour. There was lots of music. Music played a much bigger part of our life. We even got the original films before they started making crap sequels. We got films that were quite scary. And we got Star Wars before it became crap. And at that time in the 70s and 80s, our televisions were small and our phones were bolted to the wall. Now our phones are small and our televisions are bolted to the wall. And what's harming people now? And again, 2008, our main concern was knife crime. People, and I often say to kids now, does anyone here carry an offensive weapon? Nobody put their hand up, and I say, I do. And I'll get my phone out. And I say, I can hurt people really badly with this. I can humiliate them, I can threaten them, I can blackmail them. This is like a drone strike. I can cause huge harm, and I'm nowhere near people. And the internet, as I'm sure we know, is like intellectual quicksand. You go on it and you start looking, and then you pop up 40 minutes later and you think, oh my God, I was only coming in to check, you know, the train times. Social media has been a huge impact. And social media is like lots of things. It's wrongly worded. It's like public schools where the public can't go to unless you pay for it. You know, public transport that's owned by private companies. It's having a physical impact. Lots of young children's brains, the speech area of the brains is underdeveloped. Lots of kids are struggling to communicate, literally. Some kids are starting school almost unable to speak. And it's having a huge impact on stress in kids. And recently there was a survey that said that your average teenager has got the stress levels of a 1950s psychiatric patient. Suicide is going up. There was a 10-year-old last year jumped in front of a train in Bathgate because he was excluded from a WhatsApp group. That couldn't happen years ago. The sex offender in Northern Ireland recently, again, he was grooming kids as young as 4. They shouldn't have access to phones. And one of the biggest impacts on children is sleep deprivation. One of the biggest impacts of causes of sleep deprivation is being on the phone after midnight. Kids need 8 hours sleep. What happens? They then go into, if you have an hour sleep deprivation, you reduce your ability to learn by 50%. So you're tired going into school, so you have a couple of cans of Red Bull, which then make you anxious, which then makes you want to vape, because somebody said this will calm you down. Nicotine is a really powerful stimulant. And looking at the research, there's a lot adverse teenage relationships. You're more likely to be assaulted if your partner vapes as a teenager. 25% of kids vape now. It's a powerful stimulant that stops them sleeping. This is enormous. It makes you more likely to drop out of school, to non-attend school, to get into fights. It makes you aggressive. It makes you short-tempered. And we're not doing anything about it. And also, if you vape, you're more likely to take cannabis because you're inhaling something anyway. Why not try something else? And Chris Rock once said in a thing recently, we've got an addiction epidemic. We take all these things multiple times a day, and the people kind of encouraging us. Mark Zuckerberg, who famously said, "I'm vegetarian because I only eat cows from my own farm." And this other guy whose son X was on stage with him. To be fair, he used to be called Twitter, so I think X is probably a big improvement. But we've suddenly got a means of recording things. People are organising fights because they want to show it to people. And it's leading to some kids' deaths. That didn't happen 20 years ago because we didn't have the technology. If you've got kids who are inattentive, who are high effectively on stimulants of nicotine and caffeine, they're going to be excluded from school, they're going to be abused school. And the danger is we say, you've got a medical condition, have a stimulant. To me, that doesn't make sense. It's almost impossible to kind of diagnose, I think, somebody who's got the same symptoms, who's just high on caffeine, who's sleep deprived, who's taken 2 cans of Red Bull. And mental health issues are increasing enormously. And additional learning needs. This can't be seen in isolation. In one school I was in, they said 87% of kids have got additional learning needs. That's not additional, it's 87%. And we're impairing kids. 20% of kids under 16 are now classed as disabled. 10%, if you miss 10 days of primary school, you're enormously likely to have no qualifications leaving school and the impact that makes. 41% of kids have now missed more than 10% of their secondary schooling. 52% of kids have got no close friends. But they'll have 200 friends on Facebook or Instagram. And a large number of kids are sad all or most of the time because we know that social media is bad for your mental health. And of the kids who are not doing anything, who are not in training, and 18 to 25, you use the term kids lightly, 1 million kids. This is a lost generation in the UK who are just not doing anything. This is disabled. Often put this up and say Christy Brown could only move his left leg, and he managed to become an author and a painter. We're having a tremendous impact, and mental health spending at the moment is double what we spend in the NHS. And we don't need more resources. We need to prevent things rather than direct and say we need more psychiatric help, we need more additional learning needs, we need more support. We need to stop these kids getting ill in the first place. And John Carnochan, one of the first things I remember him saying was when he said he'd talk about violence, he said, we treat it by building more prisons. He said it's a bit like saying we'll treat HIV by building more graveyards. Prevention is what we need. I think what we're doing to kids is we're giving them a nocebo. A placebo, you say, this is good for you, this will help. A nocebo is we say to kids, there's something wrong with you. You can't achieve. You've got this wrong with you. You've got additional learning needs. We're not encouraging kids. We're going the opposite. We're almost giving some kids will be getting a hall pass to say, you badly behaved. Well, that's because of something else. We're not looking and say, why are you badly behaved? Because you've been up half the night, you've had 2 cans of Red Bull, and you're then vaping and you're overstimulated. And when I was at school, I always remember they used to say anorexia and bulimia, it's all caused by exposure to catwalk models. The only time I saw catwalk models when there was an article about anorexia and bulimia. Kids' brains are incredibly sensitive. They're incredibly suggestive. They're much more prone to addiction. They're much more easily influenced. Who are the influencers now? People like this. And again, the reality is, and this was on the news, people are we don't like to talk about it with the kids, but 1 in 14, children under 16 have been sexually assaulted. That's not without consequence. 1 in 8, send me pictures. If you love me, you would send me your picture. One of the girls worked with at Glasgow Royal, 2 kids under 16, sending pictures to each other. One of the other girls decided to share it with the class. The other girl killed herself, and the other girl's not going to be doing medicine anymore, and she's on the sex offenders register. The impact is massive, and kids just physiologically are stupid, frankly. Most of sexual offences now are under 16. That's a terrible indictment. And whether we like it or not, again, online pornography is addictive. it has a huge impact. A lot of it is very aggressive towards women. It's very dominating. A lot of it's very violent. And, we're now campaigning to try and get strangulation in Scotland made illegal. It is in England, and Northern Ireland and Wales. It's not in Scotland at the moment. This is common for women, and they think it's normal. And it's gone up massively, really since the advent of the smartphone. And if you beat someone up and tell them they're worthless and abuse them, they're more likely to kill themselves, as in Fiona Drewry's daughter, Emily, did. And we saw, again, a case recently. Now, whether you can make a direct correlate is very difficult to prove legally, but we know it happens. And sexual offences recently recorded an estimated 2 million. That's 25 years, and every woman in Britain will be sexually assaulted, statistically. That's a bad place. We need to spend a lot of time educating men. We need to kind of man up, And when I was at school and a child, there was these terrible, frightening public health adverts. There was crossing a road, otherwise you'd be obliterated by an oncoming car. Don't go freshwater swimming, otherwise you'll end up in a fridge that wouldn't open from the inside and you would either asphyxiate or drown. Go out and play with your frisbee, you'd end up in a power station, you'd be electrocuted. Make some chips, you'll set the house on fire. Go and see a puppy, you'll be molested. But there was a nice man who was saying, please keep safe in cars. Oh, this will keep you in the car. Oh, you can't get out of the car. Oh, that's a shame. And then our parents would say to us, go out and play. And we'd be like, no, it's a nightmare out there. And the last public health campaign I remember was HIV, which again was a bit of a, and again, you would just get into university thinking, and then it's like, oh, by the way, if you have that relationship, you're going to die. And I thought, so it was pretty effective. We need to kind of concentrate on making kids happy. We need, kids are not happy. You sometimes need to work at it. You need a bit of instruction. Do things that make you happy. Exercise. Andy Murray, who was the long-distance runner, said, if this was a pill, we'd all be taking it. It's antidepressant, it makes you sleep better, it reduces your stress, improves your exam results. Unfortunately, this is the kind of notion that most kids have. The kind of, if you see kids in the street, you think, have you not got a PlayStation to go to? And Meta launched this 3D thing, said, it's a bit like going into a room. And I thought, I can do that by going into a room. I don't need a £500 bit of kit. We need to encourage kids. This is a picture of my grandmother. When she was 70, she took up running and she started running 3 miles a day. She's now 98, and we have absolutely no idea where she is. Kids on average will spend 8 hours a day in front of a screen. 8 hours a day is enough time to become a concert pianist in 3.5 years. 8 hours a day. Most of us have done the same thing. We could be a concert pianist, if we'd spent a wee bit of time in it. And a school recently in Wales, what they said was, having your phone in school, shouldn't really be a radical thought. But what they found was that kids, there was 70% reduction in exclusion, 80% reduction in bad behaviour. Kids were playing more, they were speaking to each other, and exam results improved. All from saying you can be without your phone for a short period of time. And kids, if they're less lonely, loneliness is a bad thing. We're social animals. And it's the more time you spend on a screen, the more lonely you get. The more the more obsessed about diseases. And I've got this wrong with me, and I've got that wrong with me. You get anxious about texting people, about speaking to people. Nomophobia is when you suddenly think, oh my God, I'm in the toilet, I forgot my phone. And people are running out with their trousers around their ankles trying to get their phones to get back to the toilet. That's not normal. And the health impact, loneliness has the same impact as smoking a packet of cigarettes a day. So one thing that COVID showed us was, if you're deprived of human contact, it's terrible. And at one point, I was so devoid of seeing people and so devoid of excitement, I appeared naked at the front door to my postman. And I don't know what upset him more, the fact I was naked or the fact I knew where he lived. And the future isn't set. We have a chance to change things. And I think our aim is hopefully to kind of try and do a Guinness Book of Records where we're trying to speak to thousands of kids simultaneously. Use the same technology. Go into kids all across Scotland, because we can't be everywhere at once, and say, look, here's some ideas. Here's how to make yourself happy. Here's how to do things. Here's trying to have a better life. And I saw this a number of years ago, and I just thought, again, religious connotation, but I thought it's for a good cause. This is a similar thing. We need to get kids off the phone. All they need to do is turn the phone off, get 8 hours sleep. The world will be revolutionised. Thanks very much.